Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. A lot of talk's going on about Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. I'm even talking more and more about them because we're getting closer and closer to the fight. Let's just hope they get into the ring. Nonetheless, a lot of different approaches, a lot of different philosophies on what Crawford and Spence has to do to win the fight. And just to put it in perspective, I think there are a lot of things we could talk about, but I think the jab is probably what will get Spence or Crawford the victory. And I mean that because the jab is the most important punch in boxing. Like Larry Holmes said, he had the best jab in the business. Everybody talks about the jab, even Roger Mayweather. Everything starts with the jab. You look at guys who are really effective jabbers and pretty much went their whole career winning fights off of having an effective jab, like Winky Wright and Ike Corte. And even Mayweather was a damn good jabber. Oscar De La Hoya was a pretty good jabber. Okay? But we know in boxing the jab is considered probably the most important punch. Not the strongest punch, but the most effective and most important. Now, they say if you can't establish your jab, which we've seen with Terence Crawford and Errol Spence, they've both been able to land their jabs, establish their jabs, but I think Spence works a little bit more behind his jab than Terence Crawford. But at the end of the day, they would say, if you can't land your jab, you won't land anything else. Now, remember, there are different styles of fighting, right? You look at a guy who hasn't continued boxing, but a guy like Andre Berto. He would throw a little jab here and there, but for the most part, he was all about his power shots. Ruslan Providnikov, another guy, really wasn't about his jab. He was just coming there and brawling and swarming you with power shots. But when you get in there with a guy who has the good jab, has the educated jab, has the discipline, they were able to nullify him. Okay? So that says a lot about defense too. If you can shut down your opponent's jab, which Crawford and Spence are going to have to figure out how to shut down each other's jabs. They're going to have to figure it out because I think if Crawford, more for Crawford, because Spence seems to use the jab more than Crawford, but if he can shut down Spence's jab, he effectively will probably shut down their offense, Errol Spence's offense, or at least he'll reduce that offense to a much lower percentage than what we've got accustomed to seeing from Errol Spence. And that could result in Errol Spence getting frustrated, since it sounds like he does get frustrated in fights. If you listen to what Sean Porter had to say, you listen to what Kell Brook has to say. And when people get frustrated, especially a guy like Errol Spence, if he gets frustrated and can't work off of his jab, he may start to reach which he's had a tendency to do in fights, and could result in throwing, some haymakers from too far out, which could open things up for Terence Crawford. Okay? Now, I'm going to tell you something. When you sit here and you take a look at, why are we talking about the jab? Why do you think the jab is so effective? I'm going to tell you right now, if I was Bomac, if I was Derek James, I would definitely be working on throwing the jab. Different ways to throw the jab and different ways to shut down the jab. Because that is what both of these fighters are going to need to do. Because ultimately, like I just said, it will slow down their offense. Now, I'm going to tell you this. There are some fighters who some people felt that during their heyday, they just had an unstoppable jab. Like Larry Holmes. But then I'll tell you, well, look what happened when he ran into Mike Tyson. He still had his jab, but Tyson was able to do other things to nullify Larry Holmes' best weapon, which was the jab. Okay? Speed, explosiveness, power, those things came to play. Now, when you look at what's going on here, right? There's no singular perfect, jab defense. But this whole thing about fading back, right? Throwing a jab and just fading straight back. When I look at Terence Crawford and Errol Spence, when the jab is thrown at them, I don't really think out of both of these guys, neither one is the kind of fighter who'll go straight back. Crawford moves in on angles. He's very intelligent with the way that he fights with his offense, and he switches. Errol Spence is more, come forward. He doesn't necessarily go straight back, but he will go straight back, but then he has his high guard up as well. So now if Crawford or Spence can feint, right? If they can use that jab to feint, it doesn't matter if these guys are using angles, circling, going straight back. It really doesn't matter because that feint can get them out of position. And then you know what? You could find somebody ending up on the ropes. And then Crawford or Spence could go to work from there. The other thing that I think could be a bit of an issue, and we're going to see who tries it, is catching the jab. Okay? Now, I know something I was taught early, man, is, catch the jab, counter off the jab. So if you jab, let me see, you left. Yeah, so I was southpaw, right? So you get a guy from orthodox stance, throw his jab. I would catch it with my right hand and immediately explode with a power jab right back in his face. Like, it was just like, as soon as you feel the contact, you react. You know what I'm saying? And that would catch him off guard. And so if you time it just right, you catch it. As soon as you feel the contact, you react with a really fast jab, then come back, and that just to blind him, then come back with the big left hand, sometimes double up the left hand. And all three of those shots can land. But I just really think we're going to see who can effectively feint and get these guys to react. Because I'm telling you right now, I think Crawford and Spence both are going to bite a whole lot because they know what the other guys bringing to the table. They're not going to be in there making this into a tickling contest. They're not going to be able to just stand in there feeling like the opponent can't hurt them. It is going to be a tough fight. Okay? So catching the jab, feint and jab, and then, hit them with your hook as well. That's something else that both of these guys can do. But it's going to mean somebody has to sit in the pocket and take a risk. Because I'm going to tell you what, if all you do is pull back from the jab, then we're going to see something happen that I've seen both of them do, right? Because if the feint's not working, if the catch and counter is not working, well then you know what? Maybe throwing that jab straight to a person's stomach is the next option for these guys. Both of them do it. Both of them throw the jab to the midsection. The only person who did it the best with that syringe-like jab was Mayweather. Mayweather would take the life out of you. It's like spearing you into the body. And then once he gets you there, he starts going upstairs. So the bottom line is, you can see when it comes to these boxing techniques that there are counters, okay? And there's pros and cons to what Crawford can do, to what Spence can do. You know what I'm saying? Now, I'll tell you this. Go ahead and get in the shower. Sorry, that was my son. He just came home. One of the best ways, in my opinion, is to mitigate risk and minimize openings of these techniques that Crawford brings to the table with his jab and Spence brings to the table. Is just to vary your jab defense, man. Basically giving guys different looks. Because Errol Spence and Crawford, let me tell you something. This is a difficult fight, but they have to find a way to keep each other thinking and keep them reactive. You can't allow either one of these guys to get comfortable, to get creative, and get their rhythm. Once that happens, it could be all downhill. Now, I'm just telling you, it could be all downhill, right? So when you look at something, right, as far as how to defend against the jab, right, the things we talked about. Now, I'm sitting here thinking about the importance of the footwork, okay? Using your hands to parry a jab, to catch a jab, that's not necessarily the first line of defense against a jab. It's something that will work. But footwork, let me tell you, using those feet to get out the way, that probably, I would say that may be the number one go-to when you're trying to defend against someone with a really good jab. Because it leaves your hands and head free to defend. If you're using your feet to get out the way, you still have your hands when you're there slipping punches and catching punches, but then now your head is tied up, your hands are tied up, and you're not really thinking about getting shots off. You're more thinking defense. But if you're able to use your feet to get out the way, well, then now you may get that person out of position. They may get themselves out of position trying to throw a jab, and then now you're able to get off your big shots on them. So the pivots, foot fakes, switch steps. I mean, those are just things that are very advanced techniques that both of these guys can do. It's just a matter of if they can do that. You know, taking half a step back. Who's going to be able to take a half a step back when the other person throws the jab? Okay? But you got to be careful because, you know, these guys, Spence and Crawford, they can't come in here and develop low energy. I'm telling that right now. You know, to just think that they're going to be able to fade away from the jab and just basically take a backward step and just think everything's going to be okay. No, it's not. Right? It can get you out of danger, but you got to be able to pivot and get yourself out of the way. And I'm going to tell you this right now, right? If Crawford or Spence is able to act early enough, right? Let me tell you something. If the step they take to get out of the way of the other person's jab, their jab won't reach them. And then they'll be able to counter them. And if they can do that effectively, you'll get the Crawford can get Spence or Spence can get Crawford reaching. And then, like I said, it could be all downhill from that. But let me tell you something. The defensive benefits of fading come at a cost. You look at Crawford and Spence trying to move away from each other. You know, now you got to think about how long it's going to take for to try to counter somebody. You know what I'm saying? So now this whole thing about stepping back or fading, getting out the way, creating distance. Let me tell you something. That it could end up making it more of a safety first type of deal than more of being offensive minded and trying to inflict the most damage on your opponent, which is what boxing is all about. Okay? You can create all the openings you want, but if you can't exploit those openings, well, then there's a problem. And especially if you're a person who has the speed, the stamina, and experience, and the referees and the judges know this, but you can't exploit that because you're getting too far out of reach, well, you know what that can do? That can start to affect you because you're like, okay, I'm getting out of reach, but I'm not willing to commit. And now you can get the person who's probably the safety first fighter to start making a whole lot of mistakes, man. Okay? Because I'm going to tell you right now, most people can't move straight forward with punches faster than they can move straight back. And there's only one, who was it? Keith Thurman. He's a fighter who can punch while going forward or back. Miguel Cotto was able to do it. Pacquiao was able to do it. These are guys who are able to punch and fire while moving. That is not easy to do. So just going straight back or fading back, how some people like to describe it, that should be done, but you know you got to be careful when you're doing it. Because what happens is if you keep doing that over and over, now you become predictable. And you can expect something vicious coming your way. And that is something with Crawford and Spence that's very, very interesting to me, is the predictability of each fighter. And I'm going to tell you right now, when you talk about fade and catch the jab, fade with the high guard pillar block, you know, fade with the hands extended for trapping proactive parries, you know, fade with the slip or other evasive head movements. Errol Spence is probably more predictable than Terence Crawford because you know what he's coming in there to do. He's coming in with, look, his high guard up, and like he said, he's stepping, okay? So that being said, we're going to have to wait and see what is going to happen because it starts from the guard, man. All right? The defense and everything starts with the guard, stays relatively close to the face, and then, you know, being able to catch the jab, parry the jab, step back, or use it, whether you use head movement or whatever. You know, all of those are things that Crawford and Spence can do, but the bottom line is, if they can nullify the other person's jab, they have to be able to get their offense off. And if they can't do that, then it's going to be a bit of an issue. Because to catch a jab and do different things, now you got to open your glove, you know, then you got to recover after you catch it. And look, catching a jab is safe because the movement is so small. But, you know, your hand reaching out to catch it can leave you open for a hook and other shots. So that being said, man, let's see what happens with Crawford and Spence and who's going to have the effective jab, who's going to nullify the other opponent's jab, and if they're able to nullify it, are they going to be able to get their offense off? But if the other person finds that their jab is being nullified, are they going to recognize that the opponent has a hand kind of extended out, and now they're open for a hook or other shots or an uppercut? And can they time it and kind of feint and get them to commit to something that they don't want to do and make mistakes? And then we're going to have huge problems, and it's going to be a huge drawback for whoever will seem to have had the better game plan. But that being said, more to come on Spence, Crawford. But I do think that it's really important for these guys to know how to nullify or counter each other's jabs before it's thrown. I really think that is extremely important. You know, kind of placing traffic in the lane of your opponent's jab. You know what I mean? You know, the jab can still travel through to discourage somebody from throwing shots. But I'm gonna tell you right now, as long as your hand is catching it, you're in position. You know, that jab's not going to be available. But they got to be able to figure out a way to get their shots off. And we talk about the tools in the bag and what they can pull out in the ring. But let me tell you something. When it comes to doing these things, these guys need to have an abundance of mental resources to deal with what remaining threats are still out there after they nullify each other's jabs. If they can do it, they need to make sure the mental resources to deal with those threats are being done effectively. That being said, more to come on Spence and Crawford as the fight gets closer. I'll be doing more videos, but I really think I talked about the wrestling, talking about the jab, and I just think that jab plays a critical role in determining really who's going to have the advantage and has the best chance of success to getting a victory on July 29th. Y'all keep cool. I'm in the breeze.